dark, it's important. Go ahead, open it.
What is it?
Gremlins arrived in 1984 as a mischievous mix of horror, comedy, and Christmas chaos. But behind the adorable face of Gizmo was a production filled with unexpected rewrites, broken puppets, abandoned scenes, and studio controversies that pushed Hollywood into uncharted territory. This film was not always meant to be family-friendly. In fact, it began as a dark, violent creature story that the studio later softened after Steven Spielberg stepped in. From surreal technical problems to strange creative decisions and near disasters on set, the making of Gremlins became a collection of stories that are far weirder than the film itself. This outline uncovers 20 of the strangest behind-the-scenes truths fans rarely hear, arranged from the most shocking to the most surprising. Gizmo was originally meant to transform into Stripe. The earliest version of Gremlins contained a twist that would have completely changed how audiences viewed the film. In Chris Columbus's original draft, Gizmo and Stripe were not separate characters. Gizmo was meant to transform into the villain after the rules were broken. Instead of the gentle, innocent mogwai that fans adore, he would eventually mutate into the vicious leader of the Gremlins. This meant the hero would lose the creature he loved, turning the story into something much darker and more unsettling. Steven Spielberg immediately rejected the change. He insisted that keeping Gizmo cute and constant throughout the film would anchor the emotional heart of the story. Without a stable point of innocence, the movie risked becoming too bleak. Spielberg's decision forced last-minute changes that required building new puppets, rewriting entire scenes, and creating Stripe as a separate antagonist. What began as a practical creative adjustment became one of the most influential story decisions in the film. Gizmo's presence as a lovable figure became central to the movie's marketing, merchandise, and legacy. Had the original plan stayed, Gremlins may never have become the holiday classic fans know today. The original script was much darker and meant for adults. Gremlins was never intended to be a family movie. When Chris Columbus wrote the first draft, he imagined a violent creature horror film with very little comedy. The tone was closer to Night of the Living Dead than anything that resembles a Christmas tale. Columbus's early script included scenes that shocked even seasoned industry readers. Billy's mother was brutally killed in the kitchen, the Gremlins ate the family dog, and the small town devolved into genuine terror instead of mischievous chaos. Spielberg recognized the potential in the concept, but immediately saw that the tone was too extreme to reach a broad audience. He asked Columbus to keep the structure but soften the violence, shift certain sequences into dark humor, and create a clearer emotional center. These rewrites drastically reshaped the film. Many of the original gruesome moments were removed entirely. Others were replaced with exaggerated comedic beats, making the Gremlins dangerous but still oddly charming. While the movie kept a mischievous edge, it no longer resembled the grisly creature feature Columbus first wrote. The transformation from horror to hybrid comedy is now considered one of the most important tonal evolutions of any major studio film of the 1980s. A deleted scene showed Gremlins killing Billy's dog. Among the most disturbing ideas from the original draft was a planned sequence in which the Gremlins killed Billy's dog, Barney. In the earliest script, the creatures do not simply harass the family, but deliver real and permanent harm. Studio executives flagged the dog's death as one of the most upsetting elements. While the film already contained intense moments, killing a beloved pet risked alienating younger viewers and creating emotional backlash among audiences. Many believed it crossed a line the movie did not need to cross. When Spielberg and Columbus began revising the script, this scene was one of the first to be removed. They realized the threat of harm to the dog would still be effective without showing it happen. Barney survives in the final film, and his safety becomes part of the emotional tension instead of a point of trauma. This deletion helped shift Gremlins from outright horror towards suspense with comedic undertones. Though removed early, the dog death sequence remains a well-known example of how far the original script pushed violence before the story was rebalanced for mainstream audiences. It also reflects how carefully Spielberg calibrated tone to maintain a broad, multi-generational appeal. The film helped create the PG-13 rating. Gremlins became part of one of the most significant moments in Hollywood rating history. When it was released in 1984, the Motion Picture Association only had two categories between general audiences and restricted content. PG films were considered safe for families, while R films were limited to adults. Gremlins landed somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. Parents expecting a light Christmas comedy were shocked by scenes of exploding gremlins, frightening attacks, and unsettling creature behavior. The same summer saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom receive similar complaints. Spielberg, who produced both films, approached the MPAA with a suggestion. Instead of pushing these movies into the R category, a new middle rating could bridge the gap. Within weeks, the MPAA introduced PG-13. This new rating allowed films with intense content to avoid the full restrictions of R while still alerting parents to higher levels of danger. Gremlins became one of the catalysts for this shift, shaping how American films have been classified for 4 decades. Today, PG-13 is the most financially important rating in Hollywood, used for blockbusters, action franchises, and large-scale family thrillers. Gremlins inadvertently helped establish an entirely new category of film guidance. Gizmo's animatronics constantly malfunctioned. Gizmo may look adorable on screen, but behind the scenes, he was one of the most unpredictable and frustrating pieces of technology on the set. The puppet's tiny size created enormous engineering challenges. Each ear, eyelid, smile, and facial twitch required miniature motors, wires, and delicate internal mechanisms. These components overheated, jammed, or simply refused to function throughout the shoot. One of the running jokes among the crew was that Gizmo caused more delays than any actor or location. Some days, entire scenes were halted because a single eyelid would not open properly. In other cases, puppeteers had to crouch uncomfortably under tables or behind props for hours, attempting to synchronize movements while the puppet misfired. Director Joe Dante often shot backup angles without Gizmo functioning, just in case the animatronic failed completely. The puppet's fragility even led to rethinking several story moments. Spielberg later admitted that the difficulty of operating Gizmo was one of the reasons Stripe was created as a separate villain. In spite of the constant mechanical trouble, Gizmo went on to become the film's most iconic figure, proving that the struggle was ultimately worth the effort. Spielberg forced last-minute script revisions. Steven Spielberg's involvement in Gremlins went far beyond producing. Once he saw Chris Columbus's original script, he believed the concept was brilliant, but the tone was too extreme for the audience he wanted to reach. Spielberg requested multiple late rewrites that reshaped characters, emotional arcs, and the overall mood of the film. One of his most important decisions was insisting that Gizmo remain innocent from beginning to end. This required altering the entire second half of the script because the original story had Gizmo turning into the villain. Spielberg also pushed for more humor, more warmth, and more lighthearted chaos instead of pure horror. Entire scenes were rewritten on set to adjust pacing or soften overly dark moments. These changes caused significant production stress, but ultimately created the distinct identity Gremlins is known for. Spielberg's fingerprints are visible throughout the final film, especially in its balance of charm and danger. Many industry insiders believe that without his guidance, Gremlins would have remained a niche creature feature rather than an enduring Christmas classic. His last-minute creative calls, although controversial, shaped one of the most memorable genre blends of the 1980s. The Gremlins needed up to 20 puppeteers for a single shot. The Gremlins may appear chaotic and full of personality, but bringing them to life required a breathtaking level of technical coordination. During production, some scenes demanded as many as 20 puppeteers working in perfect synchronization to control a single group of creatures. Each gremlin contained internal mechanisms for eye movement, mouth articulation, limb motions, and body gestures. Because they were practical effects, everything had to be performed live during filming. The puppeteers hid under tables, behind counters, or inside specially built platforms where they operated levers, rods, and remote controls. This made the set crowded, hot, and extremely difficult to maneuver. Any small mistake, such as a hand slipping or a motor sticking, meant the entire shot had to be reset. Complex sequences like the bar scene in the movie theater riot required dozens of puppets and multiple full teams working side by side. The amount of effort behind these moments was so intense that several crew members said they felt like they were coordinating a large-scale stage production rather than a film. The result, however, was a level of tactile realism that helped make Gremlins one of the most visually memorable creature films of the decade. The cast often acted to empty space. Although Gremlins is filled with animated creatures, many scenes were filmed without any functioning puppets present. The animatronics were notoriously temperamental, and breakdowns were common. As a result, actors frequently performed scenes while imagining where the Gremlins were supposed to be. Joe Dante often instructed them to react to empty chairs, dark corners, or spaces marked with tape. The difficulty was especially challenging for Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates, who had to maintain emotional intensity while responding to invisible chaos. Timing became one of the greatest obstacles. Actors had to pause, flinch, or deliver lines according to beats that would later include puppet movements. Sometimes, puppeteers operated partial mechanisms just to give the cast something to react to. But even these limited motions broke often. Corey Feldman recalled that many days felt like rehearsing a play without the other actors. This unusual process required the cast to rely heavily on imagination and direction, since each scene would be completed later through close-ups, insert shots, or functioning puppet takes. Despite the challenges, the performances remained convincing, a testament to the cast's ability to commit fully to the illusion of living creatures wreaking havoc around them. Chris Columbus wrote the script after hearing mice fighting in his apartment. Gremlins began with an unusual moment of inspiration from writer Chris Columbus. While living in a small, inexpensive New York apartment, Columbus often heard strange noises coming from the walls late at night. One night, he listened as mice scurried loudly and fought somewhere behind the plaster. The sound sparked a vivid idea. What if there were tiny creatures living in the shadows, unseen by humans, creating trouble when no one was looking? This imaginative spark grew into a short story concept that eventually evolved into the full Gremlins screenplay. Columbus wrote the script as a calling card, hoping it would help him find writing work. Instead, it caught the attention of Steven Spielberg, who immediately recognized its potential. The concept of mischievous hidden creatures felt fresh and had an irresistible blend of fear and humor. Although Spielberg later transformed the tone into something lighter, the core idea remained rooted in that moment of nighttime unease. Columbus has often said that Gremlins exists because of a quiet evening, a cramped apartment, and the unsettling sound of tiny creatures unseen in the dark. That small incident ultimately launched his Hollywood career and helped create one of cinema's most iconic creature films. Stripe only exists because Gizmo was too hard to control. One of the most iconic elements of Gremlins is the rivalry between Gizmo and Stripe, yet this dynamic did not originally exist. Gizmo's animatronic design created constant production delays because the puppet was small, delicate, and packed with tiny moving parts. It frequently malfunctioned and was difficult to perform in action-heavy scenes. Spielberg realized that relying on Gizmo for the film's climax would be nearly impossible. To solve the problem, the creative team invented a new villain, Stripe. By separating Gizmo from the antagonist role, the filmmakers could design Stripe's puppet to be larger, simpler, and more durable. Stripe's aggressive personality also gave the film a clearer threat. The decision allowed Gizmo to remain cute and beloved, while the story gained a more physical, expressive villain. Ironically, what began as a practical workaround became one of the defining creative choices in the entire franchise. Stripe's hiss, white mohawk, and wild expressions turned him into one of the most memorable creature antagonists of the 1980s. And without him, Gremlins would have lacked the classic hero versus monster showdown that helped cement its lasting cultural impact. Gremlins sparked a surprising merchandising boom. Before Gremlins was released, toy companies were not convinced that audiences would embrace the movie's unusual mix of horror and comedy. Many believed the film would be too frightening for children and too bizarre for adults, making merchandise a risky investment. When Gremlins hit theaters, this assumption was quickly proven wrong. Gizmo became an instant cultural sensation. Plush toys, lunchboxes, figurines, and storybooks began selling far beyond expectations. The demand for Gizmo dolls was so overwhelming that several toy manufacturers could not keep up with orders. Because Warner Brothers had underestimated sales potential, the studio missed out on millions of dollars in early licensing revenue. The unexpected success pushed Hollywood to rethink how creature-based films could generate profit outside the box office. From that point onward, studios began planning merchandising campaigns much earlier in the production process. Gremlins helped establish the modern model, where fantasy and sci-fi films launch with coordinated toy lines that hit stores before or during release. What began as a marketing gamble became one of the most influential merchandising phenomena of the decade. Gizmo, once viewed as a niche character, became one of the most recognizable movie mascots of the 1980s. Snow was completely artificial because the film was shot in summer. Although Gremlins is remembered as a Christmas movie filled with snow-covered streets and wintry atmosphere, it was actually filmed during warm California weather. The production needed to create the illusion of a cold holiday season, so the crew relied entirely on artificial snow. Various materials were used, including white foam, plastic flakes, and lightweight cellulose. These substitutes looked convincing on camera, but created countless on-set complications. Heat caused the fake snow to melt or blow away between takes, forcing the crew to reapply it frequently. Even small gusts of wind disrupted carefully laid snow, ruining continuity and slowing production. Streets had to be coated repeatedly, and rooftops required constant touch-ups. Actors also found themselves sweating under winter clothing while pretending to shiver in the cold. Despite these challenges, the final look of Kingston Falls remains believable, a testament to the crew's ability to create atmosphere through practical ingenuity. The artificial snow helped bring the holiday spirit to life, even though the shoot took place under bright, warm skies. It also shows how much effort went into crafting the film's cozy yet eerie small-town aesthetic, which became one of its most iconic features. The bar scene nearly broke the entire crew. The bar scene in Gremlins is a chaotic highlight of the film, filled with dozens of creatures dancing, smoking, drinking, and causing mayhem. But behind the scenes, it was one of the most grueling sequences ever attempted with practical puppets. Each gremlin required multiple puppeteers working in coordination, and many had to operate in cramped positions for long hours. The set was overcrowded with cables, technicians, and puppets, all moving at once. Joe Dante wanted a sense of non-stop energy, which meant long takes and complex choreography. Every time a single puppet malfunctioned, the entire shot had to be reset. Resetting involved repositioning puppets, adjusting props, and untangling wires. It was a process that took hours for just a few seconds of usable footage. The scene exhausted the crew, who often worked late into the night to meet deadlines. Several members later described it as the most difficult practical effects challenge of their careers. Yet the final result is one of the film's most memorable sequences, capturing the wild personality of the Gremlins in a way that felt both chaotic and strangely humorous. Without the relentless dedication of the effects team, the scene could not have achieved its iconic status. The Chinatown shop set was constructed in a parking lot. The mysterious shop where Randall Peltzer discovers Gizmo appears to be a real, aged building hidden in a dim Chinatown alley. In reality, the entire structure was built in a studio parking lot at Warner Brothers. The exterior had to look ancient and atmospheric, so production designers used distressed wood, layered paint, and heavy props to create the illusion of age. Smoke machines and low lighting added to the mystique. Building it on the lot gave the filmmakers full control over lighting, blocking, and effects. It also allowed them to shoot without interruptions from real street noise or unpredictable weather. The interior was filmed on a separate soundstage, and careful editing made the two locations appear continuous. The shop was later reused for other productions after minor alterations, which was a common cost-saving practice on studio lots. Although viewers assume the setting is a real part of Chinatown, it is actually an example of Hollywood craftsmanship at its best. The shop's atmosphere sets the tone for the entire film, and its creation in a parking lot shows how movie magic often begins in the most ordinary spaces. Phoebe Cates' Dark Santa story was almost removed. One of the most shocking moments in Gremlins is Phoebe Cates' monologue about her father dying while dressed as Santa Claus. The scene shifts from comedic chaos to somber tragedy, catching viewers off guard. Studio executives were uneasy about including such a bleak moment in an otherwise energetic film. They believed it disrupted the pacing and threatened to alienate younger viewers. Spielberg also had doubts, feeling that the tone veered too sharply toward darkness. Phoebe Cates, however, argued passionately for the scene, believing it gave her character depth and emotional weight. During test screenings, audiences reacted strongly. Although the monologue was disturbing, it became one of the most memorable and discussed scenes in the film. Its unexpected emotional impact convinced Spielberg to keep it. The moment helped define the movie's unique tonal blend, balancing humor with unsettling realism. Today, the Santa story remains one of the most talked about lines in Gremlins, and is often cited in discussions about the movie's unusual tonal shifts. Without Cates' commitment and audience support, the scene might have remained on the cutting room floor. Spielberg almost cut the Santa monologue entirely. While Phoebe Cates' Santa monologue has become one of the most unforgettable scenes in Gremlins, Steven Spielberg initially pushed to remove it. He believed the moment was too grim and risked derailing the film's delicate balance of humor and holiday charm. According to the cast and crew, Spielberg felt that the speech clashed with the playful tone he wanted to guide the movie toward. Joe Dante disagreed and argued that the monologue gave the story emotional grounding in the middle of the chaos. During test screenings, audiences were stunned by the scene, but responded positively to its unexpected weight. Their reactions convinced Spielberg to reconsider. The monologue remained intact, and over time it has become one of the most cited examples of Gremlins' unusual ability to mix whimsy with darkness. Many filmmakers and critics still reference it when discussing tonal risks in mainstream cinema. Had Spielberg followed his first instinct, the movie would have lost one of its most iconic emotional beats. Instead, the scene stands today as a defining reminder of how bold creative choices can elevate a story beyond genre expectations. Real fire was used during several Gremlin attacks. Gremlins relied heavily on practical effects, and the production often pushed physical stunts to dangerous extremes. Several attack scenes used real fire on set, including moments when gremlins catch fire or interact with flames. Because the creatures were animatronic and covered in delicate materials, using actual fire posed significant risks. Puppeteers had to coordinate movements with stunt teams, ensuring flames would ignite at the right moment while keeping performers safe. Heat frequently damaged the puppets, requiring extensive repairs between takes. The kitchen battle, where Billy's mother fights off the creatures, involved genuine flame bursts timed with precise camera movements. Safety teams stood just off frame, ready to extinguish fires if anything went wrong. Today, filmmakers would likely rely on digital effects, but in 1984, authenticity required real pyrotechnics. The practical fire stunts helped give the scenes a visceral quality that audiences still feel. The slight unpredictability of real flames added tension and realism, making the Gremlins seem far more chaotic and dangerous. These practical risks contributed to the film's lasting visual impact, demonstrating how committed the crew was to creating memorable creature action. The water tank hatching scene used over 100 small effects. One of the most striking sequences in Gremlins is the transformation scene, where new gremlins hatch from pods inside a large water tank. The moment required a complex combination of bubbles, lighting cues, steam, mechanical pods, and hand-triggered effects. More than 100 individual elements were synchronized to create the illusion of living creatures emerging from goo-filled cocoons. Effects artists crouched beneath the tank, operating air hoses, triggering pneumatic bursts, and activating hidden motors while communicating through headsets. Any mistimed cue would ruin the shot and force a long reset. Because the mechanics were tightly packed, failures were frequent. Still, the team pushed through dozens of takes to perfect the scene. The final sequence became one of the most iconic images in the film, showcasing both the horror influence of the original script and the craftsmanship of the practical effects team. For many viewers, the hatching moment created unforgettable tension by mixing biological imagery with mechanical artistry. The scene remains a standout example of how creative teams in the 1980s achieved impressive results without digital tools. Gremlins used practical ingenuity to build a transformation moment that continues to inspire creature effects artists today. Some gremlins were modeled after crew members. While designing the many background gremlins seen throughout the film, the creature effects team added playful details inspired by real people on set. Several gremlins featured exaggerated versions of crew members' facial features, expressions, or quirks. These small touches came from sculptors who wanted to personalize the creatures and keep morale high during long hours of puppet construction. Many background gremlins were never meant to have specific identities, but the subtle human-inspired features made them visually distinct. This approach also gave puppeteers more variety to work with, ensuring that the creatures looked different in wide shots and crowd scenes. The in-jokes helped keep the team entertained during an exhausting production filled with constant mechanical issues. While most viewers would never notice the resemblances, the crew members recognized themselves immediately when reviewing footage. The idea that bits of their likenesses appear in the finished movie has become a fond behind-the-scenes anecdote shared in interviews and retrospectives. These playful sculptural references show how much personality and craftsmanship the designers poured into even the smallest background creatures. It is one more reminder that Gremlins was a film built by a team that found creativity even in tiny details. Sets were secretly reused throughout the production. Like many films made on studio lots, Gremlins relied on clever set reuse to stay within budget. Kingston Falls, the movie's small town, was built on the Warner Bros. Backlot. Because constructing entirely new sets was expensive, different areas of the town were redressed, repainted, or rearranged to serve as multiple locations. Buildings that appeared in one scene as a storefront might reappear later as a home or office, with small changes in signage or decoration. Interior sets were reused even more frequently. Rooms were rearranged with different furniture, lighting, or wallpaper to suggest new locations. This practice allowed the production to film efficiently without sacrificing visual variety. The backlot used for Gremlins later appeared in films like Back to the Future, further showcasing how frequently Hollywood reuses iconic spaces. Careful camera angles and lighting kept audiences from noticing the repetition. Most viewers had no idea that they were seeing the same structures multiple times. Through smart planning and resourceful artistry, the production team stretched their budget while still creating a believable small-town environment that felt rich and fully realized. Gremlins endures because it was never just a creature movie. It was a bold experiment built from puppets, chaos, last-minute rewrites, and a fearless mix of humor and darkness. Behind every mischievous grin on screen were long nights, malfunctioning animatronics, and a team determined to bring something strange and unforgettable to life. The film pushed Hollywood to rethink ratings, reinvent merchandising, and embrace practical effects that still inspire artists today. 4 decades later, Gizmo, Stripe, and the mayhem in Kingston Falls remain part of cinematic history. These 20 behind-the-scenes secrets reveal how a small idea, born in a noisy apartment, became one of the most surprising and enduring classics of the 1980s.